Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net, monitoring just about everything this week, from the Stanley Cup Finals and the NBA Finals and getting going. We're going to be going from Cleveland out to the Bay Area and talking about that. And obviously, Oriole baseball this week in lieu of the canceled OTAs. I'm bringing on a guy that has become one of my favorite guests to have on. I've always loved his rock and roll band from the 1980s, and I, upon our first meeting, provided a picture of Steve Gorman in an old school, ornithologically correct Oriole cap at Hammerjacks. He is the longtime drummer of the Black Crowes and is coming to Baltimore this week and has reached to me through our friendship to talk about something that's very near and dear to his heart, his family, not just the Orioles, but some generosity from the Baltimore Orioles and John Angelos. We welcome Steve Gorman on. You can follow his journey out at SGS Fox out on Twitter, as well as his nightly sports radio show. Who knew a drummer could do sports radio? Gorman, I mean, you can do both of these things. I'm not amphibious like that. I'm never going to play the drums in a rock and roll band, man.
Well, you know, we've all got certain gifts, and mine are limited to exactly two.
And they are?
Talking and drumming. That's about it.
Well,
if you're looking for anything else, you're going to come up short.
I don't even need you to drum in this segment. I just need you to talk. And I got to tell you, you know my wife's journey. You and I become friends through this and, through the rock and roll sports experience, and you're down in Nashville. But a lot of folks don't know that the long-haired hippie drummer of the Black Crowes is actually a Baltimore guy, grew up here, loving the Orioles, loving the Colts. Sadly, you still love the Colts. But give everybody the story with what's happening this week, because something really special is happening, and you've had a family, really a tragedy, much like in my family, with your brother, and the Orioles have been kind to you this week, and you're doing something to bring awareness to something I didn't even know about when you called me the other day, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, man. My brother, Jim, he's a Baltimore lifer. He still lives up just north of town in Lutherville. He's got a disease called multiple system atrophy, and MSA is a neurodegenerative disease, not unlike Parkinson's, except that it moves much more swiftly. You see people that are diagnosed with Parkinson's and they live 30, 40 years. MSA is about a decade tops. It just moves much quicker. And he's going through that right now, which is it's a really tough thing. And a big part of the problem when you talk about MSA is most people say, "What is that?" It's a very rare disease. I think they say about 13,000 middle-aged Americans right now are suffering from MSA, are diagnosed. They think there's probably 50,000 that have it, but it's often misdiagnosed as Parkinson's or as another neurodegenerative disease. So MSA is very rare, but it's fatal, and there's no cure. And right now, all we can do is raise as much awareness as possible to generate donations to fund research. There is a tremendous amount of research going on to try to determine what the cause and what a potential cure for MSA are. And so that's essentially what we've been trying to do. In March, my radio show ran a month-long campaign. March is MSA Awareness Month. And then I've gotten to know John Angelos over the last few years, and then he's extended the Orioles for the day. He said, well, if you guys ever want to come out to the park and make a day of it. And so we picked this Sunday against the Yankees, June 5th. We're going to have, the Orioles are running an MSA awareness drive that will continue beyond Sunday, but we're all going to be at the game. My brother and I are going to, and a bunch of my family members coming in. We're going to take in BP, be able to hang on the field a little bit. And then the Orioles are doing a big push just to let people know that this is out there. And my brother, Jim, is a bit of in a very niche way, he's a bit of a known figure in Baltimore sports lore. He played basketball at Morgan State in the 70s. He was the first white player in Morgan's history. And
That's
I've been going to O's games with Jim my whole life. And it's funny because especially since they moved in 92 to Camden Yards, there's anytime I've ever been to the ballpark with him, somebody, and it's got to be somebody who's a little older now, somebody who's at least in their 60s, usually 50s. They just know, oh, that's that dude from Morgan. He's that one dude that everybody sees. Like, hey, Jimmy. He's got like a certain notoriety within an older section of the Baltimore sports fans, and he's just been for me and Jim, we're 9 years apart growing up of a big family, but we always had we were always very close, and the Orioles were always a huge part of that. And We've been to I mean, all the games I remember are the games that I went to with Jim, and that's just throughout our entire lives. The Orioles are the first and the longest lasting thing that we always connected on.
Well, I connect with you on the Black Crowes and on the Orioles, and you've been this journey of growing up here and going all over the world with your crazy rock and roll band and winding up down there in Nashville. How often do you get back for games and stuff? And, I mean, how close are you following? I mean, you do sports radio for a living now, and I know how hard that is to do at a national level. I did it 15 years ago, and keeping up with things, there's not a lot of time to watch the Orioles when you have to watch the NBA, when you have to watch the NHL.
No, I'm not. I don't get to nearly as many. I mean, I get back. The last few years, it's been once a year, maybe twice. And, it was much easier when I didn't have a day job. When it was just the Crowes, we'd either be on tour or we wouldn't. And so I'd have a few months at home, it's much easier to just jump up to Baltimore. Or, of course, I always came through playing shows. And if I was ever had a day off and I was within a couple hours of Baltimore, I mean, I was at the game, So in the last 3 years since the show got picked up nationally, it's probably it's been fewer than I would like. But I get back at least for a weekend a year. I certainly wish it was more.
And your radio show comes really naturally. Like you were just hanging out in Nashville and doing some sports radio. I sadly didn't know. I mean, believe it or not, my friends know your brother and know of your brother through you. I had no idea that you were coming back here and doing this, and certainly had no idea that you've been doing sports radio for a little while before you decided to sort of put the sticks down and open up the mic and do it full time.
Yeah, I was doing it off and on for a few years here locally. I sat in on a show back in maybe 2008, just a local show. I knew the afternoon drive guys, and they said, "Oh, come in for a day." And I came in and did the show, and right away the PD said, "We should do a weekly segment with you if you want. It's fun." And I thought, he goes, "Hey, man, we could put a sponsor on it. I could throw you a couple bucks." It was real simple. And I looked at him and I said, "I'd really rather have my own show." And he kind of laughed and he goes, "What is it?" And I said, "It's musicians talking sports." And being that this is Nashville, he didn't think that was a crazy idea. And, about 10 days later, I was on the air saying, "This is Steve Gorman Sports." And it's one thing to have that idea floating in your brain for a while, and then it's another to go in on a Sunday night and turn the mic on. And I realized immediately, like, oh my God, what have I done? I've been sitting in on other people's shows. I don't know how to do a show myself. So it was very much fake it for a while and figure out if this is really something you want to do. But I
did the air drums for a long time, Gorman. You know what I mean? I play the air.
Yeah, sure.
I can play like with two pens on my table, but then you have to go really do it. And I've done these American Idol competitions for 15 years here, looking for hosts. It's way, way harder, even if you're used to being on stage. And it's a grind. I did 4 hours a day. You do 2 hours a day, right?
It's 2 a day, yeah, and it's a grind, but ultimately though, it's not unlike music. I can go see a band in a club that's terrible, but I can tell that they're talented and that they're on their way somewhere good. And I can go see a band that's really good, but that's all they're ever going to be. And I think it's the exact same. It's like that in any endeavor. And I mean, it's sports talk, but there's a creative angle to this. There's a passion to this you have to have. And if I listen back to the first 6 months that I was doing when I was national, even on Fox Sports Radio, that was a big step up to go there. And it was just as much in over my head at the time. But if I went back and listened to those first 6-8 months, it would make me cringe. But the one thing I always knew is, we have a vision. We're going to be really good at this. It just takes time. And like anything else, you got to spend time in that batting cage. You just got to take the reps and get the reps and get the reps. And then pretty soon you're not thinking about the technicalities of it anymore. You're just kind of floating and you're flowing and you're moving forward. And, I've always compared the two because, when this band called Mr. Crow's Garden started in 1987 in Atlanta, we were god awful, but we thought we were the best band in the world. We were the worst band in Atlanta and the best band in the world at the same time because we had a vision. We knew where we wanted to get to, and it took us. And we put out a record, and we were on the road, and we still weren't there. But once we'd been touring for a couple, 3-4 years, by the mid-'90s, we were at a point where it was like, I'll put that band next to any band that's ever existed.
You still loving this? I mean, it's a hobby until it's not anymore, right? And
Right. Yeah.
and I love it, but I don't love it all the time. And certainly, my battles with the Orioles. And by the way, on the record, you can let John Angelos know that I'm very happy he's kind to you. He should be kind to everyone, quite frankly. But that's another story altogether. You are throwing out the first pitch, but there comes a point where when you do get treated like garbage by the Orioles for a quarter of a century, as I have been, and I'm wearing my Oriole hat right now, which my white paneled, the Rick Dempsey '83 hat, the appropriate hat, as you would know from our childhood. It can sour you, and it's much like being in a rock and roll band. Like, I'm sure there's bands you love. You're in Nashville. There's artists that you love, and you meet them out somewhere, and it doesn't go so well, even within the framework of your own band sometimes, that, it can sour you. You love to play the drums, but I bet you didn't always love the music business, right?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, it's like you said, when your dream becomes a reality, you have to acknowledge that it's now reality. If you keep waiting for the dream to if you keep waiting for that reality to match what you used to imagine it being, you're going to go down real fast. You've got to constantly adjust your understanding of the world you're in and your expectations from that world, and that's the hardest part. When you see people jump into something new and they hit a wall 6, 8, 10 months in, it's because they haven't recalibrated. And a lot of times you have to be told to recalibrate because, what gets you in the door to begin with is a passion and a mind and a one-track mind. Like, I will not be stopped. This is my journey. This is my goal. I'm going to get there. Well, once you get there, once you get whatever you think there is, if you don't acknowledge right away, okay, now I'm at step one all over again, you're going to have a lot of problems, if that makes sense. And when you're in the music business, the goal is just back in the day, it was get a record deal, get signed, get a record deal, get a record deal. Well, once you get a record deal, after about a week, you go, wait a minute, I got to make sure that the record label actually takes my calls now. And then it's like, get in their face. And then when the record comes out, it's like, how do we get radio to play it? And then once radio plays it, you're like, how do we get on Letterman? And then if you aren't moving forward, you're going to slide back immediately. And it's similar. In my experience, like I said, I compared everything with my career to going through it with the band, which is the idea of a nationally syndicated show. That's an amazing goal. But once you get there, you realize, well, there's a lot of pros to this. There's a lot of cons. It's a different world than I was in doing local radio. And you have to navigate, and you've got to start looking at what the reality of your situation is, and then reestablish, okay, well, where do I want to take this from where I am now? Not where did I think I would be, but this is where I actually am. Where can I realistically go from here? You have to constantly be aware of those things. And, and I didn't do that early on in the Black Crowes. We did think when the first record came out, we thought, oh, this is all there is. We'll just tour and write songs, make records, play. It's easy. It's just the same thing. And a few years into your career, you suddenly notice, like, wait, why don't I feel better about everything? And it's because you're still looking at it from the eyes of a guy who didn't know as much. Your vision has to match your knowledge and your information, or you're kidding yourself.
Well, and then there comes a point where you do something you love, and it turns into a job, and it turns into work, and it feels like work. I mean, it is work. It's how we make a living. But then, with the days it feels like work, boy, it's almost depressing, right? Because you don't know anything else, especially when you've dedicated your whole life to doing it. I mean, I retired from doing sports radio after 14 years of doing it every day. I took about 8 years off, and the last 2 years jumping back in here it's a privilege, and it's fun because I get to talk to guys like you and a million other people like you that I like. I get to pick the people I talk to. That wasn't always the way, and I know you're doing national sports radio, and there are days they come in there and say, you got to talk golf today, and you really don't want to talk golf. You really want to talk about whatever you wanted to talk about.
Right.
And that's really no difference, and I'm watching vinyl. I'm catching up, and I know that wasn't your thing, but there really does come a point where, they hire you as the blues musician and tell you to sing pop songs. I had that happen to me at the national level as well, and, part of that for me now is I'm doing it on my terms, and I'm almost 50 years old. That's kind of hard. It takes a long time to be able to get to the comfort level where you're like, I'll do it, but I only want it to be happy because I know what it's like to slog through and mail it in.
Yeah, well, finding your passion is step one in life, and then finding what you're good at is step two, and then step three is figuring out how to make both of those applicable. You know, if you're good at what you love and you can determine what those things are, I think you're a definite step ahead of the game. And I think that, everybody, you go through periods where, when you are doing what you love, it becomes a job. And again, that becomes kind of a drag, because when you were picturing it in your head 5 years earlier, you just assumed, if I'm doing what I love, what could ever change? But life happens. Things change. If you're not evolving, you're sitting still. And I mean, in the music world, if you're sitting still, you're sliding backwards. I mean, you're either progressing or not. When you see bands like U2 or Metallica, like a couple bands just off the top of my head who've been around now for a really long time, and they're striving to do something they've never done. Like Metallica made a big deal about going to play in Antarctica for some contest winners a few years ago. And they got a lot of heat for it, and people really like, oh, stop. It's just you're doing it just to say you did it. There's no practical reason to go to Antarctica. I'm sitting there going,
well, the Penguins might like the music, dude, right?
Well, but I fully understand it. It's like, that's the whole point. If you're 40 years in, 30 years in, and you're still doing something you've never done, that's interesting. I played a gig 2 months ago with a band called Jason and the Scorchers, one of my favorite all-time bands. I loved them when I was in college. And they don't play very often, and they kind of have a rotating cast of drummers, but they called because they had a one-off gig for a TV show called Bluegrass Underground. And we did the show in a cave. And all I thought was, I've never played in a cave. I mean, I would go play in a cave with anybody. Just like at this point, if you're describing a venue that I've not played, I'm like, I'm there, done, whatever it is.
How many venues have you played in? I mean, like, literally, it's thousands, right? I mean, all over the world, from bars that used to be there, then there was bars in the 80s, bars in the 90s, and then clubs, and then theaters, and then you've played stadiums, you've played arenas, you've played 3 different hockey rinks in certain cities, right?
Right. I mean, I don't know the number, but it's definitely, I don't think it's not 10,000 gigs, but I'd say it's somewhere in the, I don't know, 3,000 to 4,000 gigs probably.
But in venues, some of those venues you played many times. It's like going to stadiums. I did the stadium tour last year. I've seen Major League Baseball now in like 50 stadiums. I mean, it's insane, but there's a limited amount of that. There's only so many caves you can play in, right?
That's very true. And there's the gigs that stand out are the ones that are the most unique, like actually the spaces too. We've played, there's everything from, like you said, hockey arenas or on stadium tours and soccer stadiums in Europe. And then, we did a gig in Moscow in 1991. There was 600,000 people there on an airfield. And that was just beyond description. I mean, it's whatever the biggest gig you've been at, multiply it by 6. That's how many people were there. And then I played the basement of a Chinese restaurant in Greensboro, North Carolina, to literally nobody.
Was the food good?
It wasn't, but it was free. That was we got paid in Chinese food, and there was no one there. And we said, well, we're not even going to play. And the woman said, I'm feeding you, you're playing. And we got up and played a 45-minute set to nobody.
Well, I'd like to see a video of that on YouTube at some point. Steve Gorman here. He is SGS Fox out on Twitter, and, of course, the longtime drummer of the Black Crowes, and many folks don't know, huge Orioles fan. Talk about your brother a little. This is an older brother, correct?
Yeah, he's 9 years older than I am.
I mean, give me the inspiration. 9 years older, so he's 18 years old, the only white guy playing basketball at Morgan. You're 9 years old. I bet there were some life lessons there for you as a very young man that your brother taught you, that now you're standing behind your brother,
Yeah, oh, absolutely. He's always been we always had the relationship where I have 5 older brothers, 2 of which are really close in age, and then I have 3 that are older. And the 3 guys that were on the older side, 2 of them got married when I was a really little kid. So Jim was the one who was still sort of available to be my mentor. I could call him at any time and he would answer the phone. He didn't have a real life, basically. He was a college kid, and then he was a post-college kid. And, he was the guy that, and we also had this Orioles thing. So we would always when I moved to Kentucky when I was 10, and he was back in Baltimore, anytime the O's were on TV, if there was a national game, he always called and said, hey, watch the game. I'm going to be there. And he always got on camera, always. And And it was a way of that I
That's
can't
cool.
even express what that meant to me, to be 12, 13, 14. I'm 700 miles away, and I'm watching every pitch. I'm not blinking during the game because I know at least once he's going to be looking at that camera, making a funny face or doing something.
And we didn't have DVRs then, right?
We had nothing back then. And it just meant everything to me. You know, Earl Weaver's last game in 1982, final day of the regular season, they get blown out by the Brewers.
I remember it well.
To not, you know, it was tied on the final day of the season. Brewers come in and blow them out. The O's had won 6 out of 7 and then lost, or 6 in a row and then lost that one.
Yeah, Jim Palmer doesn't like talking about that day.
Of course. Well, at the end of the game, Earl walks out of the dugout. The whole, you know, Wild Bill Hagee, everyone's spelling out E-A-R-L, Earl, E-A-R-L, Earl. And I see my brother standing on the dugout, and then he turns and runs, and 2 cops go after him. You know what I mean? Like, I can't tell you what that meant to me. You know, like, I just, that connection, it's, in the modern age, when everyone's got video phones and everyone's got everything, to say I saw my brother on TV, it's like, yeah, whatever. But back then, man, that was like, it was like a smoke signal from 700 miles away that I could read and go, we're still cool, man. We're all good, you know. It just meant everything. And, you know, you mentioned him playing at Morgan. Marvin Webster was his roommate at Morgan State.
Wow.
And, Marvin was the number 1 pick in both the ABA and the NBA draft.
Legend.
And I'm a 9-year-old kid in Severna Park, Maryland. We're playing a game of wiffle ball in the backyard, and up pulls a Mercedes-Benz with my brother driving and Marvin in the passenger seat that he had just bought with his signing bonus. And then Marvin gets out. This guy's the number 1 pick. He's just signed his first NBA deal, and he plays wiffle ball with us for an hour.
How did you do? Did you strike him out or anything, or no?
I don't even remember.
A little movement on the ball, though, for sure.
It was just cool. Yeah, I mean, we were just having fun, and it was not unusual at all. I mean, the guys, that Morgan State Bears team ate a lot of my mom's cooking over the years. You know what I mean? She was used to cooking en masse for 8 kids, and then Jim would show up with 5 or 6 dudes, and she would just cook until they were done, and it was just my childhood was just spent obsessing over sports and listening to records. And until I was 10, all of those sports were Maryland-centric.
No wonder we get along, Gorman. Steve Gorman here from the Black Crowes and from the Fox Sports Radio family. He does sports radio every night from 6 to 8. You can tune him in anywhere the internet takes you. We'll also have this out in our YouTube chat as well as all over Twitter for us as well. All right, so you're throwing out the first pitch on Sunday. You've done a lot of things. You've been around the world. You should write a book, Gorman, but throwing out a first pitch, have you done that yet?
I've done that on the minor league level here in Nashville with the AAA Nashville Sounds. I've not done a major league first pitch. I want to say this. I think we're doing the first pitch. I think I'm going to be out there. I think Jim's going to throw it, and I'll be with him. I'm not sure. I don't exactly know. We'll figure out the actual protocol probably on Sunday.
How's he doing right now with this disease? And I want to go back to that because that is the reason you're here. For those of you just tuning in, Steve Gorman here, our pal from the Black Crowes, brother suffering from multiple system atrophy. It's called MSA, and through a friendship that Steve has with John Angelos, the whole Gorman clan. I hear you're going to take up like a whole section out there. There's a lot of Gormans, right?
We got about 35 coming in for this one, I think. We put the word out, just on the family Facebook page, and I'm thinking, it'd be one of those things like a few people would be able to get in for it. And as it turns out, I think everybody is. So we got a lot of our whole family, my whole, I'm one of 8 siblings. I think all 8 are going to be there, spouses, kids, very much everybody coming in. So it's it's any way at this point of the game, paying tribute to our brother is the best thing we can do, and then trying to raise awareness for, like I said, this is an incredibly rare disease, and the MSA Coalition has been very helpful. MSAcoalition.org is their site, and it's a rapidly growing site. They're doing amazing things with fundraising, which are funding, they're funding some real research, and every year they're getting twice the money they raised the year before. It's growing very rapidly, and they're just wonderful people. They've been a big part of this as well.
When was your brother diagnosed?
The official diagnosis was 2 years ago. He had gone through 5 or 6 years of symptoms and declining and issues that are all very standard to this disease. But MSA is the sort of thing where they have to rule out pretty much everything else before they determine what this is. It's a real tough like I said, it's similar to Parkinson's, but it moves much quicker. The cerebellum just simply atrophies over time. And what starts with fluctuating blood pressure and balance issues, and then, symptoms come on for a few days and then they go away, and then they come back and they go away. And it's, all individually, none of them seem to be too traumatic. And it takes years of these patterns for doctors to then put together enough to say, oh, wait, this is all connected. This is what this is. And it's a terrible thing to find out you have, because as of right now, there's no cure.
Yeah, I mean, I think fans here have been very familiar. I had a dear friend of mine, Frank Vanek, who lost his faculties over 2 decades, and we've all seen what happened with O.J. Berganson with ALS and with Lou Gehrig's and those kinds of slow onset, but just your life deteriorates. And I'm just hoping your brother and you and your family have some peace and some fun, and I hope the Orioles win on Sunday, right? I mean, they're playing the Yankees, right? So you don't have any of those people in your family, right? The pinstripers, right?
Well, only one, and that would be my son, who was born in New York City, and therefore loves to twist the knife in my back.
What'd you do wrong? What did you do wrong, man?
He was born in New York. What am I going to do? And we moved to Tennessee. I said, you got to be a Titans fan. But since he did, he has a great affinity for New York, and what can I say? He was given a lot of Yankee swag when he was born, and my wife wouldn't let me burn it, and one thing led to another, and suddenly I got a Yankees fan in the house.
All right, man, so I'm not going to bug you about the Black Crowes, but I will tell you, throughout my wife's illness, a friend of mine bought, and I know the Crowes, allowed the downloads and sell the downloads. I went to the 9:30 show on the last tour, and I was in Vegas when you played the Hard Rock. And when my wife took ill, my buddy who went to the shows burned down a couple of CDs, and I still have a CD player in my car, and I threw them in my car, and all I listened to for 6 months, back and forth to the hospital, and when I'm in the parking garage underneath Hopkins, as my wife is now a 2-time survivor, I hear your music, and I know the band's not there anymore, but Trigger Hippie is there. What's going on with the new band, and when are you going to come around here and break the skins out, as they say?
We're putting together the second album right now. We're going to record it. We'll have it finished by the end of the summer or September, and then in the spring of 2017, we'll put out album number 2 by Trigger Hippie, and we're going to be on the road a lot next year.
Hey, tell me about the band a little bit, because I mean, obviously Joan Osborne, there's some other celebrity involved in this, but more at this point, you're doing it for the love of it, right? Love of the game at this point, right?
Oh yeah. This band started from the bass player is a guy named Nick Goverick. He's a Nashville guy, and he's one of my closest friends. And we've been jamming together since 2004, just putting things together to have fun with. And around 2008-09, we started talking about, I was really the one spearheading it. I said, man, we are a real rhythm section. Like when we play together, we play like a band. We're not like 2 dudes just jamming it. It really goes somewhere else. And I said, and he's a brilliant songwriter. Just one of these guys in Nashville who does, plays with a lot of people, bounces around, and always sort of had a vision for a band and always wrote beautiful songs. And then the more I got to know him, I thought, geez, man, we got to do this. And he and I were basically sitting around one day saying, let's find a singer. And, Nick is a good singer, but he's not a singer, if you know what I mean. And we said, let's find a singer. Guitar players are falling out of trees around here. Let's just get together and jam and see what happens. And we thought about a million different singers that we knew. And being in the situation I was in for 27 years, that being the Black Crowes, my one condition is simply, I just can't deal with any drama. I just got to find some people who are steady. I need some steady eddies around me. And
I think the drama around your former band is well documented. You can Google it, right?
Absolutely. And I was in the car one day, and a Joan Osborne song came on, and I went, oh my God, I haven't seen Joan in a few years, and we've been friends forever. And I called her and said, look, this might sound totally insane, but you want to start a band in Nashville? And she laughed and she goes, yeah, I'm ready to be in a band. I'm kind of sick of being like, just me. And we had a laugh, but then she said, I'm going to be, I'll come down in a couple months when I get some time. And that was in the fall of 2010. She flew down for a weekend, and the 3 of us sat together and started just throwing out ideas, and we started putting songs together right away. And it's just been a slow work in progress since. We put an album out in 2014 and did a bunch of dates in the fall of 14 up into the summer of 15. And then came off, and then now we're putting the second record together. And then next year our plan is to be much busier than we were the first time around. Like, that was get your feet wet, put the music out there. Radio was very receptive. We did a lot for the amount of dates we did. We went much farther than we expected to with this thing. It's funny, the older you get, the more patient you get in certain ways. Like the idea of taking 2 or 3 years to develop something. In my 20s, that would have been impossible. Right now, it's like, yeah, that's a pace that makes sense because, as we've said, I have a daily radio show. I mean, I'm doing that full time. And Joan has a million projects she's doing. Nick is doing a lot of projects. Everybody in the band is busy with other things, and we want this to be something that when we come together and do it, it's very special and it's a lot of fun, and we really get the most out of it. And so it's been to this point a really good pace, and now we're ready to really kind of turn it up a little bit.
And there's some appreciation of being, at this point, having gone through all the ringer and doing something you love to do. I mean, I feel the same way every day. I'm back to doing what I was doing 25 years ago, but doing it differently. And I guess the same thing could be said for you, not getting up there and playing Wiser Time every night, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I want to say something. What you said about listening to our music. I mean, the Black Crowes drama is much documented, and like I'm going to get coffee with Rich Robinson today. We're fine. I haven't talked to Chris Robinson in 2.5 years. It's like we're some of us are fine, some aren't. It's all been that way for 30. I went 2 years without talking to Rich in the 90s. I mean, bands are just inherently insane at a certain level. And as
Can
much
I tweet that out? Bands are insane at a certain level.
It's no secret. I mean, as much as everybody talks about that element of the band, I mean, I've never been anything but proud of the music we made, and the fact that people still listen to it. I always think it sounds trite to even try to express how much that means, but that means everything. It just means it was worth it. It's like, man, that means it really did matter. Like all that bullshit that we went through and put ourselves through unnecessarily. If somebody 3-4 years later is still listening, and especially in a situation you and Jen are going through, if that's something that's helping you, then it's like, man, we did our job, and that it's something that I'm very proud of.
One night, I owe you beers, and you need to let me geek out and just ask you about songs. I mean, I don't want to do it on the radio. I want to just do it just for my own edification as a fan.
Sure thing, man.
That's it, man. That's all I can ask for.
And if I don't have an answer, or if I don't remember what was happening at that time, I'll just make something up. It'll be fine.
Oh, that would be even better. Make some stuff up. It's always better that way. Steve Gorman here from the Black Crowes and from Fox Sports Radio and from Trigger Hippie. You can find him out at SGS. That's Steve Gorman Sports Fox, because he is on the Fox Sports Radio. Hey, we'll see you on Sunday. Love to the family, your brother. Appreciate you reaching to me. Get everybody out there. Where can people go to learn more about MSA other than just doing what I did, which is Google it? And I learned that it used to have another name, Shy-Drager syndrome, right?
Yep. MSAcoalition.org is a great place to get some information, and they're the group that I've worked with. There's going to be, the Orioles are going to be tweeting things out and putting things about this weekend, and then MSA awareness throughout their social media. So that's going to make it easy if anybody's following them in their various platforms.
All right, man. Well, get lost amongst all those Gormans this weekend. Have a great time at the ballpark, and hopefully the Orioles will do the good work and really disappoint your boy about the Yankees on Sunday, okay?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it. Well, the last time he was at Camden Yards was Jeter's last game. So, it seems like I got to have a Yankees game to get him up to Baltimore with me. But I'm working on it.
How old is he now?
He is 16 this summer.
Man, there's still time to end that rebelliousness and get him into an orange cap. Maybe this Sunday's it.
Well, this Sunday for sure. Ain't gonna be no pinstripes on this Sunday. Trust me.
Put your foot down. Be a parent. That's what I'm saying.
Of course.
Steve, great having you on, man. Be well.
Thanks, bro.
There he goes, Steve Gorman of the Black Crowes, of Fox Sports Radio, of Trigger Hippie, and, of course, promoting MSA, multiple system atrophy that his brother is suffering from. They'll be at the Orioles game as a special guest on Sunday, and hopefully we can continue to educate. And you can always find Steve at SGS Fox out on Twitter, one of my favorite dudes to get to know here. And I didn't really know him all these years in the band. Played with Jimmy Page. I spent many a night with the Black Crowes. I even remember some of the nights. You can find anything you miss out in the Bio Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. If you missed any of this, you can also find it out at our YouTube WNSTV page. You can find me anytime. Nasty at WNST.net. We are WNST.net AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore Sports.